Recent turbulence in the Middle East has undoubtedly opened the way for extremist groups and forces that, in the name of a political interpretation of Islam, are wreaking havoc in many countries, particularly in Iraq, Egypt, and Syria. There is no doubt that many of the extremists consider other believers and Christians as infidels, as agents of hostile foreign powers, or simply as an easy target for extortion. Let me first welcome our guests who are with me today at the studio, Mr. Joseph Barakat, member of the Lebanese Forces political party in Lebanon, and Mr. Anjem Chowdhury, British Muslim social and political activist. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Before we start our discussion, let's have a look at this brief report.
The persecution of Christians in the Middle East continues to worsen with the rise of radical Islam and fueled by the revival of radical movements during the Arab Spring. In Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood burned at least 38 churches and damaged 23 others, blaming Christians for the ousting of President Morsi. The Christian community in Egypt constitutes about 10% of the 83 million total population, making them the largest Christian community in the Middle East. Because of the violence, some 100,000 Christians have fled the country since 2011. The advance of ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, is another chapter in the long decline of 1,000 years of Christian presence in the region. ISIS first emerged in Syria and was initially welcomed by Syrian rebels and their foreign proxies, who believed that ISIS's fighting experience could help topple President Assad and his government. Immense acts of brutality against Christians were committed in Syria, causing most Christians to flee their homes. The media has largely ignored these horrifying crimes, labelling them as part of a sectarian civil war and undermining the criminal and dangerous nature of ISIS. In June 2013, several Christian villages were destroyed and about 400,000 Christians fled Syria in that same year. In Iraq, ISIS seized Mosul, the second largest city, committing horrific acts against one of the most ancient Christian communities in the world, forcing them to leave and destroying the most important historical sites of Assyrian Christianity, leading Washington to show some sign of concern. Iraq is the fourth worst country for Christians. A country that was once home to 1.5 million Christians is now home to only 150,000.
Yes.
Later, we have a phone. We will have a phone engagement waiting with us. Okay. And now we will be joined by Salah, Stephen, writer and poet, joining us via Skype from Egypt. Welcome on Straightforward. Salah, Christians of Egypt have been accused of inciting opposition to overthrown President Morsi. The Coptic Orthodox Pope Tawadarius II was alongside now President Abdel Fattah Sisi during last year's July 3rd announcement. Since the ousting of President Mubarak, around 100,000 Christian Copts fled Egypt. Do you think they might come back under the rule of President al-Sisi?
The reality about those who already left or supposed to be fleeing from Egypt is most of them is seeking better life conditions and escaping the bad economic and social crisis in Egypt. So they are not likely to come very soon. They might go back and forth and visit. As many millions of Egyptian, both Muslim and Christian, already go and immigrate to the States or the West in general.
And Salah, according to the Copts, what is it exactly that stands in the way of coexistence of Christians and Muslims under an Islamic state, which was proposed by the Muslim Brotherhood?
Okay, the problematic issue is that the Muslim Brotherhood or any political movement under the name of Islam, they use the Coptic as an scapegoat. One day they could be friends, other day they could be enemies. They use them as a card just to mobilize more followers because the religious sentiment or feelings are very volatile in our country, in our culture. So they find an enemy for these naive followers or the illiterate category of the society by targeting the churches, the Christian, styling and polarizing them as enemy for applying the Islamic law.
My last question, Salah, Stefan, is protection a valid top priority when it comes to Copts voting for a president in Egypt? Or could we not argue that protection shouldn't be a concession for the Christians and that the Copts and other factions should seek a sustainable reconciliation that will promote tolerance in the future, regardless of who is ruling the country?
Yes, I can say that the Copts are very optimistic about the Sisi new administration and about the atmosphere that prevails in Egypt since our two revolutions, because the coexistence spirit, the harmony between the real general public of both Christian and Muslims have been higher than ever, despite the fact that the heavy losses and casualties that we have witnessed or paid exceeded all what we suffered for 40 years before. But for the public majority, there is a lot of tolerance and understanding of the need of each other and acceptance of each other. Mm-hmm. But we don't believe that El Sisi or any president will be like a magic wand. We're waiting, everything will depend to a great extent on our new parliament. Yes. We need a lot of new legislation, new laws, and enforcement of law to protect the citizens.
Mm. Salah Stephen, writer and poet, joined us from Egypt. Thank you very much indeed for your participation.
Thank you too. Thank you very much.
Let's move to Iraq now, where the city of Mosul, once home to 40,000 Christians, now has less than 2,000. This happened in the space of few days. We are now joined by Barim Behram, Executive Committee member of the Assyrian General Conference. Welcome on Straightforward.